The mist does not merely settle upon the ancient oaks. It clings to them like a burial shroud, heavy with the scent of wet pine needles and decaying loam. In this pale, shifting gray, a solitary iron-hobbed boot hovers over a seemingly undisturbed patch of vibrant green moss. Beneath that soft, inviting velvet lies a silence sharpened by sheer desperation. One step. That is all it takes to cross the threshold between the king's peace and the earth's violent hunger. Here, in the forgotten deep, dwell men who carry their sins burned into their flesh. They are the outcasts, fugitives marked with branded thumbs, fleeing the cruel arithmetic of the crown's justice. To survive the starving winters, they have woven their paranoia into the very soil. With splintered, scavenged antler picks and bleeding hands, they hollow out the forest floor. They do not build walls, they carve voids. In the damp dark of these excavated pits, they plant ash stakes, their points hardened in the embers of smokeless fires, until they are as black and unforgiving as the iron law that chased them here. This is not the work of soldiers or kings, it is the architecture of the hunted. Every strike into the earth is a silent prayer against discovery, every sharpened branch a testament to the bitter cold and the endless gnawing fear of the rope. They hide their cruel harvest beneath a lattice of brittle twigs and dead leaves, burying their terror beneath the idyllic woodland floor, and then they retreat to the shadows. High above, suspended in the tangled canopy, a rusted iron bell chimes weakly in the wind. It is a fragile, lonely sound, a quiet warning to those few who know its sorrowful song. As the chime fades into the mist, the woodland holds its breath. This hidden pit is not mere cruelty. It is the physical shape of their exile, an invisible wound waiting beneath the leaves. Yet the earth is not the only domain the hunted have claimed. Where the ground ends, the weeping branches begin, and the forest air itself is beginning to harbor its own breathless, invisible terrors. A frayed hempen rope sighs against the bone-white bark of a silver birch, a sound so thin it is barely audible above the relentless churn of the rushing river below. It dangles with a deceptive grace, swaying in the damp draft of the valley. To a man riding in haste, it is nothing more than a stray vine or a trick of the evening light. But this is a cord born of theft and desperation, woven from stolen ship's rigging and the coarse hair of slaughtered horses. It hangs invisible among the drooping, silver-leafed willow branches, a patient ghost waiting to embrace the throat of an armored pursuer and jerk him from his saddle before he can draw a single breath of the forest air. These are the defenses of the shattered. The men who set these snares are not the romantic heroes of campfire ballads. They are the hollowed-out remnants of war. Deserters from the king's levies, they have traded the gore-soaked mud of forgotten sieges for the terrifying anonymity of the deep woods. They carry the weight of their desertion like a physical stone in the chest. To hide from the keen-nosed hounds of the high sheriff, they boil thick pine pitch over smokeless fires, coating their skin and their gear to mask the human scent of sweat and fear. Their hands are perpetually stained black, cracked skin etched with resin and a deeper, more permanent regret. They have survived the iron of the battlefield only to become the very shadows they once feared. As twilight begins to bleed the vibrant greens and golds from the canopy, turning the world into a landscape of bruised purples and charcoal grays, a lone thrush begins a frantic, mournful melody. It is a warning, or perhaps a requiem.
The snare tightens slightly in the rising evening breeze, a silent sentry demanding a final toll from a world that has already stripped these men of their names, their lands, and their honor. In this kingdom of the excluded, the price of entry is often blood. Yet, as the darkness deepens, the threats do not only come from the swaying ropes above. Sometimes the most terrifying weight is the one that stays perfectly still, waiting for the sky itself to fall.
An ironwood trunk groans against a single brittle trigger stick, a sound like a bended knee on a cold floor. Its massive crushing weight is suspended high within the cathedral arch of the forest canopy, held aloft by a tension that feels almost spiritual. Cloaked in pale gray lichen and the skeletal remains of dried ivy, the deadfall looms over a narrow game trail where the air smells faintly of damp earth and crushed wild garlic. It is a guillotine of timber and gravity, waiting for a single misplaced footfall to release its pent-up fury. To pass beneath it is to walk through the valley of the shadow, knowing that the sky above has been weaponized by those who have nowhere left to run. The outlaws who dwell beyond this threshold are a congregation of the condemned, a brotherhood bound not by blood, but by the shared scent of the gallows. By the sputtering, acrid light of tallow candles, they huddle in the hollows of the roots, whispering forbidden prayers that would be deemed heresy in the stone cathedrals of the city. They do not beg the heavens for salvation or for the forgiveness of their trespasses. They pray only for invisibility. They have placed their faith in the ancient, indifferent forest, trusting the timber to smite the men who carry the magistrate's torches and the king's seal. These are men who have seen their homes burned and their names struck from the parish registers, and in their exile they have made the trees their silent gods of vengeance. As the first bite of frost settles on their tattered wool cloaks, turning the fabric stiff and silver, they sit in a terrifying stillness. They listen. From miles away, drifting on the cold Atlantic wind, comes the rhythmic bell-like baying of hounds, a sound that signals the approach of a world that does not want them. The hanging timber above the trail remains a suspended judgment, a heavy silence waiting to fall upon an unforgiving world. But as the ironwood holds its breath, a different kind of danger begins to stir in the mud of the lowlands, where the metal of the earth is turned into a jagged, hidden tooth. A scatter of rusted, four-pointed iron stars lies submerged in the deep, freezing mud of the river ford, their jagged profiles cloaked by the silt of 1,000 tides. To the eye of a traveling knight, the water appears calm, reflecting only the gray indifference of a winter sky. But beneath that placid surface, the earth has grown teeth. Forged from stolen horseshoes in a smokeless subterranean kiln, these caltrops are designed with a singular, cruel geometry. No matter how they fall, one spike always points upward, thirsting for the soft frog of a horse's hoof or the thin leather of a soldier's boot. These are the desperate barriers of a camp composed entirely of the cast aside. Here, the forest has claimed the widows of the great mortality and daughters who fled the suffocating weight of brutal dowries and forced marriages. Their hands, once meant for the delicate rhythm of spinning fine linen or tending to cottage gardens, have been calloused by a different labor. Now those fingers gather poisonous yew-berries to smear on arrows and grind rusted metal against river stones until the air smells of sparks and ozone. They move with a quiet, lethal efficiency, their girlhoods not merely lost, but stolen by the relentless, cold calculus of survival in a world that sees them only as property or prey. They wash their tattered garments in the freezing shallows, their skin turning a translucent blue in the biting wind, yet they do not flinch. Every scar is a map of a life they refuse to let be extinguished.
They have learned that the river does not just provide life, it provides a border, a sanctuary bought with the promise of pain for any who dare to cross without an invitation. As the first light of dawn breaks over the horizon, a white heron takes sudden flight, its wings beating a frantic rhythm against the stillness of the reeds. The bird rises, pure and untethered, leaving behind the jagged teeth that remain hidden beneath the black water, a quiet, submerged testament to hearts that have hardened into iron. But even as the river guards their flank, the shadows of the deeper thickets hold a different kind of poison, one that does not strike at the feet, but seeps slowly into the very blood of those who wander too far.
The sharp, bitter scent of crushed wolfsbane lingers on the edge of a boar trail, a chemical warning that the very air has turned hostile. Concealed within a thicket of rotting hawthorn, where the thorns grow long and black like the needles of a seamstress, a tensioned yew bow waits in the shadows. Its string, fashioned from twisted badger gut, trembles with a low, kinetic hum, a note of music that promises only a sudden, sharp end. Locked into the stock is a wooden bolt tipped with jagged bone, its point smeared in a foul, dark paste of nightshade and river muck. It is a silent executioner, one that does not require a hand to pull the trigger, only a footfall to snap the thread of a life. This lethal machinery is the handiwork of the truly abandoned, the infected. These are the outcasts who bear the livid, weeping marks of leprosy upon their limbs, men and women driven into the damp hollows of the earth by the torches of terrified villagers. To the world of the pious, their very breath is a sin, their existence an offense to a God who seemingly turned his face away. They move through the undergrowth like specters, dragging their heavy brass warning bells through the brambles. The clappers are muffled with rags, for in the forest the bell that once announced their presence to the healthy now serves only to mark the boundaries of their desperate, lonely kingdom. Setting these tripwires is an act of agonizing guilt, a slow poisoning of the soul. As they stretch the line across the path, their minds drift back to the sun-drenched fields of their youth, to the faces of the neighbors, the cousins, and the childhood friends they must now maim or kill to stay hidden. Every trap is a betrayal of the community they once loved. They do not kill for sport or for gold. They kill because they have been taught that they are already dead. A single dry leaf spirals down from the canopy, landing softly across the taut string. The line vibrates with a faint, sorrowful tremor, a ghost of a sound that disappears into the rustle of the trees. The forest is a tomb of their own making, a place where the living and the dead have blurred into one. Yet, even as they guard their isolation with poisoned bone, the air around them begins to carry a different sound, a frantic clattering of bones that signals a warning far more hollow and haunting than a muffled bell.
A chorus of hollow sheep bones and rusted thimbles hang suspended from a spiderweb of fine linen thread, swaying with a ghostly rhythm in the throat of the ravine. They dangle in the deepest shadows, veiled by the thin, acrid smoke of a dying hearth that stays low to the ground, never daring to rise above the tree line. To the untrained eye, the knight, the tax collector, the high-born traveler, these woods are asleep, wrapped in a peaceful, primeval slumber. But the exiles know better. They have learned through seasons of blood and betrayal that in the wild, silence is a liar. It is the breath held before a scream, the predator's pause before the strike. These are the displaced, the tillers of soil who once knew the warmth of a thatched cottage and the predictable turning of the plow. Stripped of their ancestral lands by the iron-fisted greed of lords who value sheep grazing over human lives, they have become shadows. They survive on the illicit taste of poached venison and a constant bone-deep vigilance that ages the soul before its time. In this camp of the forgotten, the children do not laugh. There is no play in the dirt, only the grim study of the forest's alphabet. They are taught to speak the language of cracked twigs and shifting winds, to read the sudden silence of a songbird as a herald of death. For them, a snapped branch is not nature's music, it is the sound of an approaching noose. When the invisible linen string finally snaps under the weight of an intruder's boot, the clattering bones will shatter the stillness like breaking glass. It is a macabre wind chime, a symphony of the dead designed to warn the living. This alarm does not ring for the changing of the hours or the call to vespers. It rings only when violence returns to claim the remnants of their lives. As the first bone strikes against a rusted thimble, a spark of panic ignites in the dark. The warning has been given, but for those who flee further still, the solid earth itself is about to betray them, dissolving into a cold, watery reflection of a moon that no longer recognizes their faces. The black, glassy surface of the fen reflects the cold, unblinking stare of a bruised moon, turning the stagnant water into a mirror of polished obsidian. To a stranger lost in the dark, the path ahead appears as a solid, silvered ribbon of earth stretching through the marsh. But this is a cruel illusion, a landscape of betrayal. Beneath the drifting duckweed and the pale floating lilies lies a false bottom, a treacherous lattice woven from rotted willow and waterlogged reeds, designed to collapse at the slightest pressure. It is a watery grave, an invitation to the abyss, waiting for the heavy, confident stride of those who believe they own the world. This trap is the masterpiece of the millers, men who once spent their lives in the warm, dust-choked cathedrals of the local abbey, grinding golden wheat into flour for a god they once loved. Now they are the hunted, branded as outlaws for the sin of resisting the abbot's heavy and heartless tithes. They hide in the suffocating damp chill of the lowlands, their wool tunics stiff with dried mud and the salt of their own sweat. They huddle in the reeds, whispering frantic, breathless prayers to a creator they fear has long since turned his face away from this hollowed-out land. Around the elder's neck hangs a rusted iron key, the heavy weight of the tithe barn door he once locked, a symbol of a life that was stolen by the very church that promised him salvation. They do not fight with swords, for they have none. They fight with the land itself, turning the bog into a silent partisan that demands a heavy price for entry. A single frog croaks, a sharp, wet sound that pierces the breathless night, signaling that something is moving through the mist. The bog waits in patient, deceptive silence, offering the promise of solid ground only to swallow those weighed down by the iron of armor and the leaden weight of greed. As the water ripples and the first bubble of air rises from the depths, we are left to wonder, in a world where the earth itself has become a weapon, is there any sanctuary left for the soul, or have we simply traded one cage for another in the deep, dark heart of the forest?